Hello and welcome to Revelation TV Presents. In today's programme we'll be discussing the new Hollywood blockbuster known as The Darkest Hour, and to discuss this remarkable film I'm joined by Deanna Fletcher, who's a radio host and broadcaster. Welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Can you share a bit about your faith, how you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and how he led you into broadcasting and entertainment?
Well, that's a very big question. I am fortunate enough to have grown up in a Christian household. My family are ministers, my parents are ministers, and have done some really notable things in their remarkable lifetime. So I got to grow up in a church environment, which has been so fun. I'd say probably actually the challenges for me as your typical pastor's kid might have come a little bit later, where you are kind of reevaluating your faith at a certain age, maybe around 18, 19. Is this for you? And just really ensuring that you stay connected with the local church can be also really hard for various reasons. So I think it's the same kind of story that so many kids like mine have had. But when I was 13, there was a couple that my family knew through our local church who in their retirement decided to start a local Christian radio station. We lived in Copenhagen at the time, where my parents were missionaries basically to Europe from Australia. And so this couple started a local radio station and asked me and a girlfriend if we would do some radio programs for young people. So we were 13 and they put us on the air live with very little training. And I just kind of took to it like a duck to water. So I've been really fortunate to know from a young age that my faith was important to me, even though you have to, I suppose, evaluate, make decisions along the way, have a real experience, but also I've been privileged enough to know what I want to do with my life, not just to work in broadcasting, but also to work in faith-based broadcasting. And that's kind of served me well, really, throughout my life.
Fantastic. And can you tell us how you got involved in entertainment? Because a lot of your programmes to do with entertainment, they're to do with films and what have you, and that's why you're here today.
Well, I really think that Christianity should not be void of lifestyle, like we're all normal people, but quite often what happens is when you switch on a radio station, if it's Christian-based programming or whatever it is, you might hear a lot of faith-based content that doesn't necessarily lend itself to normal life, whether that's what people are watching on television, the music that people are listening to. It's that concept that the one doesn't have to be void and separated from the other. Your faith doesn't have to be void from living a normal life, going out and seeing your friends or going to the movies or just things that we all do. And for some reason, sometimes faith-based broadcasting doesn't discuss those things. So like in The Darkest Hour, there are plenty of themes in that movie that we would talk about or experience in our own day-to-day life. I mean, for example, it's a historical drama, so it's talking about our history. There are great themes of leadership in the movie as well, but also it's just a great movie. So you want to go to the cinema and watch something and enjoy it and talk about it. Why can't faith-based media and radio programs do the same?
No, I agree with you completely. And Deanna, what would you say about the film? Because you've seen the film. I had the privilege of seeing it as well back in December. And I found it an inspirational film. And Gary Oldman, who plays Winston Churchill, was incredible. He's tipped to win an Oscar for his role as Winston Churchill. But also I think it sensed the complexities of the time, and really even calling it The Darkest Hour was very, very appropriate, because this was Britain's darkest hour and this was Winston Churchill's darkest hour. What was your impression of the film?
You say it was his darkest hour, but I guess it was one of his finest moments as well. It must have been so hard doing that job. I loved the movie from start to finish. Of course, the cast were incredible. The production value was amazing. The director was on point. The cinematography, I mean, it's just a great film. You mentioned already Gary Oldman doing so well on the awards circuit for the movie with the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice Awards. Even after, in the past, he said all sorts of negative things or gotten into disputes a little bit with the people that make the Golden Globes happen. They still gave him an award this year, and it's so justly deserved. I have to be honest with you, I didn't quite understand at first, because I went to the red carpet premiere and Gary Oldman and the cast were there, and I just sort of thought to myself, Gary Oldman's in this movie. I don't really understand how yet. And then of course it dawned on me that he is Winston Churchill, because it's a completely unrecognisable performance. I think he had to sit through something like 63 hair and makeup sessions, and he thanked his team in his Golden Globe speech for that, which I'm sure, you know, you must get to know people very well when you're in that chair so often. I think that the artistry in this movie, it just is incredible all the way through. The writing is great, and it's just so nice to see another fantastic film that talks about our nation's history and really the nations of the world, because Britain leads the charge and was so instrumental throughout this season of our time. So I'm just really glad they made it, to be honest.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at the trailer for The Darkest Hour.
I believe we are to meet regularly.
Once a week, I'm afraid. How are you for Mondays?
I shall endeavour to be available on Mondays.
4 o'clock?
I nap at 4.
Is that permissible?
No, but necessary. I work late.
Then perhaps lunchtime.
Lunch? Mondays? Your Majesty.
Prime Minister.
You've wanted this your entire adult life.
No, since the nursery. What do the public want
It's
me?
your own party to whom you'll have to prove yourself.
I'm getting the job only because the ship is sinking. It's not a gift, it's revenge.
Let them see your true qualities, your courage,
My poor judgment.
your lack of vanity,
Yeah, my iron will.
your sense of humour.
Ho, ho, ho.
Now go.
Go.
Be
You what?
yourself.
There's nothing heroic in going down fighting if it can be avoided. Nothing even remotely patriotic in death or glory if the odds are firmly on the former. Nothing inglorious in trying to shorten a war that we are clearly losing.
Losing! Europe is still...
Europe is lost. And before our forces are wiped out completely, now is the time to negotiate in order to obtain the best conditions possible. Hitler will not insist on outrageous terms. He will know his own weaknesses. He will be reasonable.
When will the lesson be learned? When will the lesson be learned? How many more dictators must be wooed, appeased, good God, given him mixed privileges, before we learn? You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth!
We must now select my successor, and it's only one man the opposition will accept.
He stands for one thing, and one thing only, himself.
Why have I been forced to send for Churchill? His record is a catastrophe.
Let them see your true qualities, your lack of vanity,
Yeah, my iron will.
your sense of humour.
Ho, ho, ho. Your Majesty.
It is my duty to invite you to take up the position of Prime Minister of this United Kingdom.
I speak to you for the first time as Prime Minister.
The Germans have encircled 60 British and French divisions. We are looking at a collapse of Western Europe within the next few days.
How long have they got if we don't rescue them?
Maybe 2 days. We would need a miracle to get our men out.
You have the full weight of the world on your shoulders.
We're facing certain defeat on land, the annihilation of our army, and imminent invasion. We must negotiate peace talks.
When will the lesson be learned? You cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth!
Nonsense. The only slippery slope.
Would you stop interrupting me while I am interrupting you? We have before us many, many long months of struggle and suffering. Even though many old and famous states have fallen into the grip of the Nazi rule, we shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender! For without victory, there can be no survival.
It's the Darkest Hour, and I can definitely recommend it. It's definitely worth seeing and watching. Absolutely compelling watching. Seeing that trailer there kind of brings back seeing the film. What are your lasting impressions of the film? And someone who maybe hasn't seen a film about World War II, even though there are so many films out about World War II, what's the impression they'll come out with?
Well, this is the thing. I'm not a big war fan. I know you're a historian and you know all about these sorts of things, and it's a keen interest for you. But I generally see a movie advertised about war, and I know they're important movies that need to be made and stories that need to be told because of all the lives that have been sacrificed, all the hardship. It's important that we tell those stories. I just don't like watching them, if I'm being really honest, usually because of the high violence factor. And it's the sort of violence that is very realistic because this actually happens to people, and I find that hard. This movie tells an incredible, just one element, one side of what happened during that period in our history, but does so in such a compelling way that I think it'll draw absolutely anybody in. It's absolutely a drama. There are some really funny moments in the movie as well. I mean, the script is just hilarious. The cast are exceptional. It's just worth seeing. I mean, I always find it really funny talking about movies, like I know what I'm talking about. I just enjoy film, and I enjoy that we can go in and see these kinds of things and have these sorts of conversations, and it brings our history to life. And these great actors and filmmakers, they work so hard to make these things happen, but I don't know anything about actually making a movie, so I feel a little bit weird. But I think for me, the lasting impression of the movie has to be certainly victory and certainly perseverance. And that really important thing that we sometimes don't have the confidence to do, which is to trust our own voice. Because throughout the film, and I'm sure throughout that actual time in history, Winston Churchill's being told one thing. He's being told, no, negotiate with Hitler by his aides. We're not going to win. We've just had a war. We don't need another one. Thanks very much. And he's actually standing his ground. And you see his wife kind of coming around him in the movie. He has conversations with the king. It's this kind of inner turmoil of, but I don't believe that we should do that. I think we should fight, and I think we will win. And I mean, look what happened.
Yeah, I don't want to give too much of the film away, but I think one of my favourite moments was just before Winston Churchill is due to give his speech to the Conservative Party. Even though he was very much disliked by his own political party, and they favoured the Foreign Secretary, Halifax, becoming Prime Minister instead of him to replace Neville Chamberlain. But it was that time when he wasn't sure whether to pursue peace, which we know wouldn't have been peace, or to actually confront the Nazi threat. And then he decides that there's rush hour traffic as there is in London, as there was back then, and he decides to take the Underground. And he just gets he talks to ordinary people just on the London Underground about what they think, to engage their sense of feeling, to engage public opinion and public reaction. And that for me was quite inspirational. I think some of our political leaders, if they went on the Underground to talk to some of the people about certain views, it could have a big impact. And that was a really nice moment in the film.
And did that really happen in real life? Or was that just movie magic?
I'm not sure. I'm not
You're
entirely
not sure?
I'm not sure on that one.
Okay. It was a nice moment in the movie anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. But also I think what was also important, and what we've seen now over a number of years, is a number of films being made about World War II and about this period of history. And this film follows on very, very nicely from Dunkirk, and I was a huge fan of Dunkirk. I think that was an incredibly powerful film. But you get an impression of how dark those times were. I mean, for example, our whole entire British army was stranded at Dunkirk. That's 360,000 soldiers on the verge of annihilation. And had Hitler's forces defeated our army on Dunkirk in France, it would have meant that a couple of months later, Britain would have been ready for an invasion and the Nazis would have taken over Britain. So it's an incredible, critical period of history. And Gary Oldman plays it so well. For someone that obviously you're not a war buff into war films, but someone of your generation, which is great, how can you encourage younger people to go and watch a film like this, and what does it have to offer for them?
Well, the great thing about Darkest Hour is I do find it to be generally really accessible, regardless of your age. I think that the character of Winston Churchill is in some form or another known to all of us. We know his name, we know he was the Prime Minister, we might be able to quote some of his speeches, and it's actually one of the things I love the most about knowing about the movie is how supportive his family and his descendants have been. Even at the premiere, they acknowledged the fact that there was something like 16 of his family in the audience. And I believe that Gary Oldman said in an interview that many of the family actually came to set one day. So you don't often hear about when a film is made about somebody's life who is such a big figure, such a well-known person, such a landmark, legendary figure in our history, almost pop cultural icon, you know, worthy as Winston Churchill is, that the family is so supportive of their story being told on film, because obviously filmmakers take creative license and things like that. So I loved hearing about the support the family gave to the movie, almost to the point where you think maybe they found it quite exciting. And then Winston Churchill's relatives, I mean, surely they've seen him celebrated in so many ways. And I certainly think that anyone of any generation, regardless of how much you know about Winston Churchill, you can get around and you can celebrate this momentous area of our history, whether you know much about it or not. He certainly is a very well-known figure, and we should know more about our history.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at Gary Oldman, who played Winston Churchill, and the rest of the cast talking about the film Darkest Hour.
Take 7. Go easy. Take 7. The elevator pitch is how Winston Churchill went from a derided outsider to saving the world.
Brilliant.
Yes.
I don't know what's an elevator pitch?
Well, that means we get in an elevator together, we're going up 2 floors, and one exec says, so tell me what it's about. It's like we're going back and watching The Player. You know, that 25 words. So tell me, 25 words or
It's the tweet.
Yeah.
That was very good, by the way.
That was brilliant.
Very good, yes. There you go, there it is.
He stands for one thing, and one thing only, himself.
Why have I been forced to send for Churchill? His record is a catastrophe.
Ben and Kristen, what was your first reaction when you saw Gary in full hair and makeup as Winston?
Well, it wasn't Gary anymore. It's this Winston Churchill has arrived and is in the house. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. I remember when we were doing the rehearsals, there was a man who runs the archive, the Winston Churchill archive, and there was a board of photographs that you'd taken with the photographer of you in costume, in all your gear. And he went up to these photographs and studied them quite carefully and said, these are extraordinary, where did you find these? I said, oh, they're ours, actually. You know, we invented them. It was I was very excited about that.
I think it may have been Doug who said, oh, there's some family to see you, or here, not to see me, but visiting the set. And I said, oh, terrific, some of the Churchills. I said, oh, great, you know, and they said, yeah, there's about 17 of them.
And they all introduced themselves as Churchill. Like, hello, my name is Henry Churchill.
Yeah,
hello, I'm Isabella Churchill. Hello, I'm Peter Churchill.
Germans have encircled 60 British and French divisions. We are looking at a collapse of Western Europe within the next few days.
How long have they got if we don't rescue them?
Maybe 2 days. We would need a miracle to get our men out.
So a lot of critics, when the reviews came out, they said it was a beautiful companion piece, coincidentally, to Dunkirk by Chris Nolan. Have any of you seen it, and what do you think about that?
I was worried. When I heard that they were doing it and we were already making this movie, I was kind of a little bit worried, and I wondered whether we might overlap at all. And I was relieved to find when I went and saw the movie that, one, it's magnificent, and 2, there is no overlap. In fact, you know,
it's a companion.
It's a companion, and in a way, an audience, you know, can get stuff from our movie that they don't get from Dunkirk, and vice versa, and that's great.
But critically, our film isn't about Dunkirk or about principally about the planning of the Dunkirk rescue. It is about whether or not Britain should do a peace deal with Hitler.
Dunkirk is a small element in our film, so there's a big point of difference there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Sort of like having really expensive second unit, isn't it?
We are or they are.
And that was the crew and the cast of The Darkest Hour. I have to ask you, when you see the crew, and this is something that they can be very proud of, this film, and isn't it great to see a number of British films emerging after the last few years that tell something about Britain's history and Britain's narrative, particularly during World War II?
For sure, absolutely. The more British films, the better. And I love that this movie has been sweeping awards season in 2018. Apparently, Kristen Scott Thomas, who plays Winston Churchill's wife, now I don't know why, but apparently she had to be convinced or kind of called back on more than one occasion. And it was either the producer or the director that was saying at the premiere, we had to convince her to do it, but I'm so glad she did. I don't know what the hesitation was, but the film wouldn't have been the same without her, because that's another figure that's important to this story, I think, is the family around Churchill.
Absolutely. And also the role of the king, who was sceptical at first, but then came around to the idea that the only person that could possibly strike fear into the Nazi regime and Hitler himself was Winston Churchill, and so therefore he decided to stand with Churchill, despite the fact that he was advised not to.
Absolutely.
And in terms of this film, obviously once you see the film, it tells and portrays that very important period of history of the summer of 1940. And of course, we now look back and see that Hitler was defeated by the decisions made by Winston Churchill and to actually stand alone against the Nazi threat. Isn't it important also with this film that the older generation should go out and watch this film, because obviously they'll remember, some of them will still be alive and maybe still remember World War II, and others that their fathers and their mothers served during World War II.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I realise all my stories are coming from the premiere. I apologise. But just in front of us, when we were sitting watching the movie, because at an event like this, many war veterans were invited to be there. And right in front of us, there were a couple of gentlemen in uniform with obviously much younger family members. We're talking about men, in their 80s, 90s. I think one was nearing 100. Wow. And they seemed to really enjoy it. There were a few, we arrived and they were in our seat, and I just said, seriously, we'll sit behind them, I don't care. They're obviously war veterans, let's honour them in whatever way we can. And we were sitting right behind them, some young people in our early 30s. So yeah, I definitely think it's generational, and I love that this movie, at least in my I don't know, limited or naive view, certainly honours the generation that's come before us.
Absolutely. And also, Joe Wright, the director of this film, has done an incredible job with the cinematography and some of the sets and some of the scenes and the lighting and stuff as well. And that's compelling, and particularly as he brings London to life as it would have been in the summer of 1940.
Oh, one of my favourite parts of this movie is just the set design. The set design, the set design, and the set design. I mean, we went to Horse Guards for this movie, where other films have been, like Bond and things like that have been made. We saw some of the underground war rooms. I mean, we really, like you said, he brought London to life as it would have been in that area. And the scene on the tube, so old school. I mean, nothing of the tube that I've ever seen looks like that now. So it was just wonderful to see such a period drama come to life in such a way as well.
And what can we expect of the award season? We've seen that Gary Oldman is tipped to win the Oscars. Do you think he'll win an Oscar for this film? And does this break with last year's winner, which was, I think, La La Land? And I'm sorry, being a bloke, I wasn't a fan of that film the slightest.
I think a lot of men liked La La Land. My brother adored it, but he's into film and all sorts of interesting artistry things. No, I think that already we've seen where this movie is going to shine its brightest probably at awards season this year, because the actors, I mean, Gary Oldman particularly, just did such an outstanding job. And there are some great films up for awards this year, so whether it wins Best Picture and all sorts of other things, I'm not the one to ask. But certainly I think that the actors and those who've portrayed some of these historical figures, like Winston Churchill, like his wife, Kristen Scott Thomas, I'd love to see her recognised for this role. I think they did an amazing job.
And also, what I find so compelling about the film is its kind of moral authority and clarity that comes across so well. And obviously then that can obviously relate to a Christian audience because, you know, it was during this very dark period of world history, British history, in which our entire army was on the verge of defeat, that the King called for a national day of prayer and repentance, so people flocked to the churches to pray and intercede. Doesn't this film show that despite the fact that we had a courageous Prime Minister in Winston Churchill, prayer was still the answer?
I think leadership as well in general is something that's discussed throughout this movie. Strong leadership, people who are willing to truly stand up for what they believe to be true, even if it's not the popular option. So whether that is standing up to Hitler, whether that is calling a national day of prayer that some people might have thought, I mean, I wasn't there and you're the historian, not me.
Nor was I.
But it's still a bold move. The Queen, it's not the sort of thing she would do today, necessarily. But yeah, I think in general, leadership and that concept and that thought of trust your voice, even if you're not entirely sure, trust your gut feeling, talk to friends and family, but at the end of the day, not let your conscience be your guide, but definitely leadership. It shows how difficult I think leadership is, whether it's on a very large scale or whether it's on a smaller scale. It could be leading a local church, it could be in your family life, it could be as a political leader. It's a difficult thing being a leader of any sphere of influence, and I think that film really put that across as a way also though of celebrating the king of the time and Winston Churchill.
And Deanna, can you also maybe tell our viewers why they should go and watch this film and why it's so compelling?
I think it's worth watching. Simply put, I think it's worth watching. Some films wait on DVD and you'll still enjoy it, but this Darkest Hour is something that's worth enjoying on the big screen so you can take it all in, almost pretend like you were in London at that time in history. But I think that anyone would enjoy it.
Deanna, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on this programme as we discuss the film Darkest Hour.
Thanks for having me.
Been a pleasure. And I just want to thank you for watching this programme. It's important that you go and watch the film Darkest Hour because it portrays what happened during those dark years of World War II. Absolutely compelling film. So thank you for watching Revelation TV Presents.